Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. This time we're going back 30 years to 1993, if you can believe 1993 was 30 years ago, for La Madre Muerta, or The Dead Mother. This is from Radiance, it's by number 24, and this is from Spain. Remember in the 90s, early 2000s, Spain and France came out with fairly, not necessarily transgressive, but pushing the kind of boundaries of horror and other things, like Martyrs and Frontiers and High Tension and Thesis. I guess The Dead Mother, or La Madre Muerta, kind of fits in with that group of films. This is fairly strong meat, but then it's good to see an 18 certificate that is actually an 18 certificate. There's nothing worse than seeing these 12s and 15s that should really been 18, or sometimes 18s and you think, why are they 18s? La Madre Muerta is an 18 for good reason. Some people might switch this film off at some point and just say this is not for me, which is fair, which is absolutely fair. There are things in the film that are fairly problematic, but I'll get to them. This is the simple story of a burglar who breaks into what looks like a restoration business. There's lots of art about, including this wonderful image, which of course is about the separation of mother and child, which is a lot of what the film is about. And he is disturbed by the woman of the house and he instinctively shoots her. And then as he's making his way out the window while stealing a bit of chocolate, the woman's daughter turns up, and there's a wonderful image when he raises the gun to her head as well and shoots. Now 20 years later, he's working in a club, a rather dodgy club with a rather dodgy owner who swears all the time, and he's still not a very nice human being. He eventually separates himself from the club's owner, shall we say, and moves in upstairs. The owner was going to go away in business for a few weeks anyway, with his girlfriend, who he is pretty much in a dominant, abusive relationship with. And just treats her terribly, but for some reason some women still stay around for that. And he is walking in town and happens to see into a clinic for either mentally ill or there's people with Down syndrome and such, which isn't really mentally ill, that's a chromosome disorder, and he spots a girl who may look a bit like the little girl that he shot, but she has severe brain damage. So he is convinced that she still knows who he is and might somehow get him into trouble, even though she doesn't seem to be able to speak. So him and his girlfriend, or basically him decides to kidnap her. At one point tried to get money for her, even though she has no relatives because he killed her mother. She's living, or sometimes she goes to spend time with an old woman to get her out of the clinic. And this is where Ishmael, the man, decides to kidnap her from, which does lead to perhaps the only bit of intentional black humour in the film. So they get her back to this club and basically tie her in chains to bed. Now, if you think this sounds a bit grim, it is a bit grim. The character of Ishmael, played by Cara El Hadi, which is probably not how you pronounce his name, who was in Time Crimes, which is a lovely little Spanish time travel film, again from that kind of period, which has got a bit of a black edge to it as well. This is on the cusp of characters are just absolute scumbags. That again, I wouldn't have a problem if you just switched the film off and just said this guy's an absolute scumbag, because I have done that myself with films. But he's just on the cusp of that thin line between this guy's an absolute scumbag who does terrible things to everybody, but there is something a little compelling about him. So it's just on the right side for me. Things like he's obsessed with the fact that the girl doesn't laugh. But then obviously you killed her mother and she's got trauma every time she sees blood, and you shot her and gave her brain damage. So it's not necessarily a recipe for a laugh-a-thon, but he's obsessed about why doesn't she laugh, because all kids laugh. I mean, obviously she's in her 20s at this point. And at one point there's a wonderful scene where he puts makeup on to try and be a clown to try and get her to laugh. So again, you might disagree between where the line is as far as this guy's an absolute scumbag, but he's a compelling scumbag, or he's just not for me, which is again understandable. I mean, this isn't a film that you would necessarily enjoy. You know, I'm not sure when I'll watch it again, but it is for me a really good film, and it does bring up questions. Again, it would never be made in Hollywood. Chances are it wouldn't be made now. Obviously the 90s perhaps was 90s, early 2000s, perhaps the last decade of kind of slightly transgressive stuff. And his girlfriend, who is in essentially an abusive relationship with this guy, at one point she says, "Oh, this is the first day that we haven't argued." And again, you always go, well, why are you with this guy? Because he's a scumbag. It's not as if they have money, they're doing this to get money. He's strictly a lowball thug, basically. But at the end of the day, some women do love scumbags. That is fact, not just an opinion. But she begins to be jealous of the brain damaged 20-year-old who's chained upstairs in the bedroom. There's a wonderful moment when she's bathing her that she realises that the girl's breasts are larger than hers. She starts having doubts that the reasons that Ishmael is keeping her are not necessarily for a ransom. There's also one of the workers at the clinic kind of follows the breadcrumbs and ends up trying to rescue the girl. You can obviously see how that goes in the film. Again, the character of Ishmael to me is compelling, even though he's a scumbag. And there's actually moments later in the film that are almost poignant. His method of going to kill her, or pushing her in front of a train so nobody thinks it was actually murder. She just must have got out and wandered in front of a train. So that plays a few times. Again, as I said, if you're thinking this sounds very grim, it is very grim. This is not a Saturday night popcorn film where you bring round your friends, if you have friends, to watch. This is probably a solitary, no pun intended, watching experience to wallow in the misery that the film produces. It's beautifully shot. At one point they leave the abandoned club to go to an abandoned church, and of course there's still lots of religious iconography about, lots of motherless children, lots of childrenless mothers, but in some strange way this very odd trio becomes a family of their own, with the mother, father and daughter, even though obviously the lines are somewhat blurred. And again, there's things in the film that people would object to, and again, as I said, if you switched it off halfway through, I wouldn't necessarily blame you. So in the package, bizarrely, there's not anything from Kat Ellinger or Alexandra Helen-Nicholas. It's all pretty much Spanish contained. So there's the story of the dead mother, which is a 38-minute documentary on the making of at the time. You get Victor's Kingdom, which is a 38-minute short by the same director, who's Juanma Bajo Ulda, which again I've probably butchered. Well, I've butchered. And again, you do get, as with all Radiance, you get the soundtrack as well in this, and a nice booklet. There's a charming image from the film, but you do actually get the soundtrack. At 111 minutes, it's probably a bit too long. I would have said 107's perfectly fine. So it's maybe a bit too long. It is unrelentingly grim. Again, there's a couple of moments of black humour, but they pass fairly quickly. But certainly, if you like your films dark, and again, that it does kind of belong to that group of films that I mentioned, and I'm sure there's plenty of others from the 90s to the beginning of the 2000s from Europe, that kind of pushed the envelope of darkness. But it's certainly worth a watch. Again, are you going to be in a hurry to rewatch it? Perhaps not, but it's a welcome addition to the Radiance line, who again, for me, they've only had one miss, I think, so far. But again, that's just my opinion, not fact. So thanks very much for watching this review of The Dead Mother. Please let me know if you've seen it and what you think of it. I know Cinema Art Therapy, or Cine Art Therapy, mentioned it in one of his videos. You can go over to his channel and subscribe, because it's an excellent channel. But please let me know what you think, and hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.